Begin the current Daf, Mesechtes Gitin Daf Samachay. Begin 4 lines down at the top of the Yommi. We were just really finishing up the sugya from the previous Daf, which we had mentioned the halacha of Rav Chizda. There was a discussion regarding the kinyanim of a cotton, which that came into the theme of our previous Mishnah regarding the Naim Marasa and the Katana regarding receiving her get. So there's a discussion regarding could a cotton be zeicha fa'acherim. So on that, Rav Chizda said, no, echad zeh. His opinion was, doesn't make any difference what age the child is. Zeicha la'atzmei can marry for himself, but ve'ein zeicha la'achem cannot marry for others. And that the Gemara continues to ask on his opinion, seemingly that we find that a cotton could be zeicha fa'acher. Sure, it's corresponds because the Cheskel turned to Daf Achem between today's Daf. So discussing today's Daf are continuing with the next Mishnah regarding in cotton a shliach that a minor cannot make an agent. Now look when in the following Mishnah when someone says makam pleni, which is when they say, hey, go ahead and give my get, receive my get in that place, is that a kapedahu? Is that saying that I specifically want the shlichus only in that place? Or is it Mara Makam who is just saying, oh, you know, you'll find them over there, but I don't care where you give it. What's the halacha going to be? And this may differ between the shlich of the husband or the wife, and the reason why it would make a difference is because Bal Medaita Megarish. Isha Bal Korcha Megarish. The husband, he could choose where he wants the gerushin to happen. The woman, she doesn't have much of an option anyway, so I don't care who you're saying it should be. You don't really have much say in the matter, and therefore maybe her words would not be as specific as that of the husband. And also regarding the lashon of the get, what's considered terminologies of divorce, the following mission after that will discuss that the parameters of those words. So begin the current daf, first finishing up the sugya from the previous daf, and Samachem at Aleph, 4 lines down from the top of the Amud. It says the Gemara, Masav Rav Avi. Rav Avi is asking again on Rav Chizda's halacha, that he said, echad zeh, no matter what age the child is, unlike a previous opinion, the child could be zeicha, could merit for themselves, but ve'in zeicha lachem cannot be zeicha for other people. And that he asked me Mishnah Mesechtes Meiser Sheni. The Mishnah says like this: Marimin al Meiser Sheni, we could be crafty, we could be deceptive regarding Meiser Sheni. Meaning, the halacha is when someone redeems Meiser Sheni, what happens is the halacha is that there's truma and there's Meiser Rishon, there's Meiser Sheni. The second tithe, the halacha is that you have to go ahead and take it up to Yerushalayim. If it's too much, what you do is you could deconsecrate, you could redeem it. But when you do that, you have to add on a fifth. What happens if someone doesn't? It's 20%. If someone doesn't want to add on that much more to take up Meiser Sheni, he could go ahead and find a way to be deceptive. The reason for this is because this that a person has to add a fifth is only when he redeems his own Meiser Sheni. He does not have to add a fifth on other people's Meiser Sheni if he buys it from his friend. So says the Mishnah Meiser Sheni, Ketzad, how could you be deceptive regarding Meiser Sheni? A person could tell his adult son or daughter, or or to his Jewish slave or slave woman, and he could say like this, like, here, I'm gifting you this monies, now it's your monies, and you go ahead and redeem this Meiser Sheni from me. That would be like your others regarding the Meiser Sheni, and they are dependent on him, and therefore what they're going to get is going to go to him. But at the same time, they're considered like other people that they could redeem it, and then you could eat it without adding on a fifth. Okay, that's the halakha of the Mishnah in Meiser Sheni. But says the Gemara, what's the case of the maidservant? And we mentioned the same idea in the previous daf, at the end of the daf. If she brought 2 pubic, meaning she's an adult already, my boygabe, what's she doing by him? The halakha is a shivchas amavriya. She goes free when she becomes an adult. Elav obviously she didn't bring 2 because she's still a ketana, and even so we see that she's quote unquote being zeicha fa'acherim over here with this money redeeming the Meiser Sheni. We consider it as an acher. So that refutes Rav Chizda says that a ketana cannot be zeicha la'acherim. Says Gemara, what are we talking about here? B'maisa bezman azed rabbanan. Same type of answer the Gemara gave in the previous daf. We're talking about something in rabbinic halacha. They were talking about Erev. We said Shetufim Mevoises Rabbanan. And here we say a similar answer that we're talking about Meiser in today's times, it's only rabbinic. For rabbinic law, then we're going to be lenient. But regarding biblical law, yes, we hold that the katana, the cotton, cannot be zeicha la'achem. Says the Gemara, really? That's how you're answering the case? Do you think you even have the halacha of a Jewish maidservant in today's terms that you're saying we're talking about Meiser in Bizman Hazeh that's only rabbinic? But by the time when the Brayta says, Ein ebed every noig the halacha of a Jewish slave does not apply. Only when the laws of Yovel apply. Why? Because Rashi says, the pasuk says in Yikra Chafei, ve'ishal mashpachta teshubu. Every man shall return to his inheritance. That's only when Yovel applies, which is when the halacha goes that what you sold goes back in the Yovel year. That's the same thing when the Eved Ivri and the Amavri will apply. So how can you be told about Bezman Hazeh if you don't have Amavri Bezman Hazeh? So the Gemara says, Eli, you're right. It's not Bezman Hazeh because we wouldn't have the halacha of Amavri. It's in the times of the Beis Hamikdash. But Atzah She'ein Nakav, we're talking about a flower pot that does not have a hole, which Draban and the whole Meiser over there is rabbinic, even in the times when there was a Amavriya. And therefore it's not difficult to Rav Chisda because, again, it is rabbinic, not because Bezman Hazeh, but simply because it doesn't have a hole, so therefore it's not really growing from the ground. So whatever Trumas and Meises of these hydroponics or whatever will be rabbinic, not biblical. And therefore we're going to be lenient. We allow the halacha that the Amavri, which the Katana will be Zeicha V'Achem, but generally, you're right, a Katana that when it comes to biblical law would not be able to be Zeicha La'achem, so therefore we have not refuted the opinion of Rav Chisda. And the Gemara concludes by qualifying Amar Rav. It says, Gimel Midos. There's 3 measurements that are distinct by the meriting B'katan of a child. First, you have Zror V'Zorkai, which we mentioned in the previous daf. If let's say you give the kid a pebble, he's going to throw it away. Eggers, you give him a nut, but nightly and he'll take it. That's one level. That's Zeich La'atzmai, Ve'en Zeich La'achem. He'll marry for himself, but he won't marry for other people. That's at least some form of intelligence. U'konegdim b'katana. And the equivalent by a young girl, she's also considered that she knows how to safeguard her kedushin, and therefore miskadeshes, she'll be engaged in the kedushin of through her mother or her brother with her consent, or when she receives it herself, if she's a minor orphan, lemiyun, for the halacha that she requires miyun, she requires this refusal, meaning she cannot just leave without refusal, which the Mishnah Yavamas Avkozam base teaches. Any girl that cannot even safeguard the ring that you gave her, she doesn't even have to refuse. She can just walk out. Refusal as an act of refusal. This girl, she understands how to watch her ring, just like the boy equivalent, he'll keep the nut and throw away the pebble. They're old enough to understand that the kedushin is a kedushin, at least on the rabbinic kedushin of a katana, and therefore she would have to do a refusal. Stage number 2, hapa'utais, the young kids, which the Mishnah on Daf Nun Testament Alf taught that mekhan mekach umemkeren memker b'metaltel, and that their purchases and their sales are valid when it comes to movable items, which we explained over there is around the age of 6, so around the age of 8, depending on the intelligence of the child. That's the next stage, that they could even do some business dealings. U'konegdim b'katana, and the equivalent by a young girl, when she reaches to these ages, that when you send her away, she doesn't come back, so she could be misgareshes, she could be divorced with her reception of her get herself, even b'kedushe avia, even if her father had gotten her engaged, which is a biblical marriage, and then the father died. So even though it's biblical, she's old enough to understand that she's divorced because you send her away and she doesn't come back. That's stage number 2. Again, these are equivalents that we're making between boys for business and for girls regarding the laws of marriage. And the third phase is higiu lo'inis nedachim. If they came to the age of when they can make vows, which is 1 year before their bar mitzvah, bas mitzvah, before they become a youth, nidrei and neder, their vows are vows. The hekdesh and hekdesh, and if they're makdesh, something is going to be considered as hekdesh. That is because they're inspected, as the Mishnah teaches in Masechta Nidaf Mehema Beis, that when she's 11 years old and one day, her vows are inspected, that if she knows for whom she's taking a neder and for whom she was makdashed, so the neder is going to be neder and the hekdesh is going to be hekdesh, even though they're still katana or cotton. That's regarding business things or regarding monetary things. Ukenegdim b'katana, and again, we're making the equivalency regarding a minor girl regarding marriage. Chayletzes, she would do chalitza, meaning if she brings 2 signs of maturity, we don't say that those 2 pubic hairs are what's called a shuma, are just like some type of a birth mark or something like that. Because before that age, if she would be, let's say, 9 years old and she would bring 2 pubic hairs, we'd still say she's a minor because the samanim are not valid, and she would not do chalitza because the Torah says ish, which we compare the woman to the man, and just like there he has to be an adult, so regarding the girl has to be an adult to do chalitza. But she could do chalitza as long as she came to the oinas nedarim. We would say that she's considered already as a isha, even though she's not even quote unquote bas mitzvah, because really that age is not really the age specific. It doesn't say in the Torah you have to be 12 years old, but that's the age that we assume, just like we do by a boy at 13. But that's what the Rav is saying, that at age 11 and 1 day already she could do chalitza. And now that's stage 3. Now stage number 4, to sell from his father's estate that he inherited property, real estate, that's Achiyeh ben Esrim. That's until he's 20 years old, we consider him as a cotton, because of the immaturity of not understanding the true value of the real estate, and therefore he would have to wait till age 20. So those are 4 different stages. So those I think are 2 different questions. I think the one about if the father made a biblical kedushin and she's receiving the get, it's still going to be benos and biyada because you don't need to have her das. That's what's unique about gerushin, that you don't need to have her das. Yeah, because you don't need to have das as long as you put it in her hand. And the chalitza, it sounds like that he's considering her as a gedayel already at age 11 and 1 day, like you see by the halach of Oynas Nadarim, that we consider them as somewhat of a gadayla or gadol already at that age. That nedreim ned and hektesh hektesh. Why specifically is that chalitza? It's a good question. Right, no, so I'm saying, so it's not against the Torah. Torah discusses regarding whose opinion do we say what, Tirchman, Kilafnezman, Kilachasman, but it would seem that already you are a Gedoyl already at age 11 and a day for those halachas, and that you're not considered as a Ketan. Right, Ketan wouldn't be able to because it says Ish, and we compare the Isha to the Ish, and it has to be an adult. But at this age, it already is somewhat of adult, and for the halacha of Chalitza, that would be sufficient. Now, moving on to the halacha, the next Mishnah, which is continuing the theme of the previous Mishnah, which is the theme of this parak, regarding shlichus, specifically regarding the shlichli Kabbalah, when the woman makes an agent to receive her get for her. It says the Mishnah, Ketana Sha'amra, if a minor says, a young girl, 11-year-old, 10, 9, says, his Kabbalah Giti, she says to an agent, here, my husband wants to divorce me, go and receive my get for me. So halacha is, in a get that she get liyada. Even though we said in the previous Mishnah, 2 Mishnahs ago, that when a woman makes a shlich like Kabbalah, the moment the shlich gets it, she's going to be divorced right away. When a young girl makes it, it's not a get that she get liyada until the get gets to her hands. The reason that simply is because she cannot create a shlichus. If the husband wants to back out before the get gets to her hand, Yachsi could get back. Why? Says the Mishnah, she ain't cut nice a shlich. A minor, which a young girl, this 9-year-old girl, cannot make a shlich. So yeah, when the get actually gets to her, she'll be divorced. But up until then, it's not considered as a shlich likapal. Now, if her father says to the husband, meaning to the shliach, he tells the agent, go and receive the get for my daughter. There, he's an adult, the father. If the shliach wants to back out, he cannot back out because it is going to be a shlich likapal from the father and going to be divorced right away. Continues the Mishnah. Someone says, give this get to my wife, complains. So now we're going to talk about certain stipulations in the shlich's appointment. He says, give this get to my wife in that place. And he gives it to us somewhere else. Pasla, it's invalid because he doesn't want that people should be talking about him over there. And he was very particular. Specifically said, don't give it over there because people are going to be talking about, oh, you heard. So it's invalid because he can make tanaim regarding what he wants to have around the kedushin. Now, but let's say his words were, Harehi b'makom pleni. Behold, she is in that place. So that, says Rashi, is only a mar makom. He's just identifying the exactly the where she is, the coordinates, and that's just where you'll find her. And therefore, if a nasan b'makom achar, he gives it to her somewhere else, kasha is going to be valid. He's not saying give it to her over there. He's saying, and she is over there. She's over there. He's just saying where you can find her.
Excuse me, simple question. Why didn't the Mishnah start with this? We learned the first 2 cases of the Mishnah previously.
Which cases?
And where the father is in the shliach with the Tana.
Yeah, so meaning you want to know, meaning if
I mean, it's superfluous at the beginning of the Mishnah.
Why? We never spoke about yet that a katana. That's
yesterday.
we spoke about being right. So Namarasa is over 12. Right. Yeah, this is katana. Exactly right. That's yeah. So that's if the husband says, Harei b'makom pleni, that's going to be kosher. Now, what happens regarding the woman? Isha sha'amra, if the woman says, "Hiskabel giti b'makom pleni," she says to her shliach, "Go get my get in that place." The kibul b'makom achar, and then the shliach goes receive it somewhere else. So the Tanakama says it's just like by the husband. Puzzle, it's going to be invalid because she bedavka said to her shliach, "I want you to get it for me only over there and nowhere else." But Rabbi Lezer actually validates that case, and he wasn't explaining why over here, and actually why not in the ratio also. But he says no, it's okay. Next case says the Mishnah, Have ligiti mimokim pleni. If let's say she doesn't say iskabel ligiti, she says go bring me my get from that place, and he brings it to her from somewhere else. Here, kosher, it's going to be valid because here she didn't say his kabali. She said bring it, and that's wherever it's brought from. That's going to be valid. Now the Gemara asks, Rebbe Lazar, Maishna Reishna. Why is it regarding the Reisha? Meaning when the husband said to the shliach, give this get to my wife in that place, so then everyone agreed that it's going to be possible. Kudolei Palik, he doesn't disagree. But Maishna Sefer the Palik. Why by the woman did he say, even though she says, go receive it to me in that place, he says it's going to be kosher? And why by the husband, when he says, give it to her in that place, he agrees it's going to be possible? Says the Gemara, the difference is like this. Ihu, the husband, that he divorces with his own intention, meaning it's dependent on him, we need his das. You could say, kapit, that he's particular, and he specifically was saying, I want that place, and somewhere else is not valid. But Ihi, the woman herself, the Baal Karcham is Kadesha, she gets divorced against her will. So from where does she know that the husband's going to be in agreement to give it over there? So therefore it must be the Maramachim Hila, that she's just giving him the coordinates, that there you'll find him. But to say, I only want them there, what do you only want? You don't even have a day yet. You're not even, the husband could choose to do whatever he wants to do. And therefore that's why Rebbe Lazar disagreed by the Sefer, and he says, even if the woman says in B'makom Pleni, it's still going to be kosher, even if it was given in another place. Yeah, look at the next Mishnah. The Mishnah continues with the same theme regarding the shlichus. Now, what happens if, let's say, the woman says, "Have ligiti," bring for me my get. Now, that word is critical because that's fundamentally different than hiskabel. Havili is that I want you to bring it to me, not receive it. Means it'll only be my get when I actually get it. So then halach is achilis b'truma. If she was the wife of a kohen, she could eat truma chagiya get liyad until the get comes to her hand, because it's like the shlich le'elacha that it's only going to be a get when it comes to her. So therefore she's not divorced until it comes to her. She continue eating truma. But let's say she says, "Iskabeli giti, I want you to accept from me my get." Oh, then that's true lecha b'truma miyad. Then she's not allowed to partake of truma and eat it right away, because we don't know the moment the shlich gets it, she's going to be divorced. But let's say she says, "Iskabeli giti b'makom pleni, I want you to receive from me my get in that place over there." Okay, then she continue eating truma until the get gets to that place, because what she was telling him was, I don't want you to be meshlich l'kabbalah only over there. Now the Gemara is going to ask, now where's the get? If the shlich received it somewhere else, then even if he gets over there, but we said already according by the Tanakhama that it's going to be puzzle previously, because in the previous Mishnah he had said that if she says b'makom pleni and he receives it somewhere else, it's puzzle. So how does it help that the shlich is going to get to that place? It sounds like that it's getting it one place and bring it to the other place. When until he brings it to that place. That's going to be the Gemara's question. But Rabbi Lazar says, actually no. Even when she says "Iskabel giti b'makom pleni," I want you to receive it to me in Montana, and where they were living on the East Coast, right away, from the moment that the shlich leaves her. Why? So Rabbi Lazar goes according to his reasoning, as we said in the previous Mishnah too, that he validates that even when the shlich receives it somewhere else, because when the woman says it's just a maramokim, it's just a coordinate. Therefore, the moment that he receives it, she's going to be divorced. So the moment the shlich leaves her, he's going to the airport to go get the get. Maybe he happened to have met right outside the city, the husband. He happened to have been flying into Newark, and he found him, and he gave him the get. So since we don't know, the moment the shlich leaves, we have to say that she's forbidden in the truma. Now, the Gemara wonders, the Gita Mia have the question that we asked before on the Tanakama, that the Tanakama was saying that, oh, okay, Maisa, she said, I want you to get my get for me in Montana, so she could eat truma until the get gets to Montana. What? The Gita Mia, but it's going to be a get? But V'amid Reisha, but you said in the previous Mishnah, Lo Gita, if she meets the husband or the whatever the shlich somewhere else and gives it to him in somewhere en route by the pit stop, and then even if he brings it to Montana, it's still not going to be a get because she bedafka wanted in that other place. So the Gemara says, Lo tzricha. No, the case is Tomad, the Amrlei, that she said to the shliach, his kabali gita b'masa machasya. Receive from me my get in masa machasya. Now, v'zimn in the mishkachas le'bebavel, and at times you'll find him, my husband, in Bavel. Oh, since she subsequently said that statement, the inference is that obviously she was not particular if the shliach receives it somewhere else. So why was she telling him that the primary place is Masa Machasya? What she was telling him was that you should not be my agent to receive it, to be divorced through you until you get over there. So what she was telling him was Mishkal, to take it, wherever you find him, you could take it from him. As we continue to Beis, but Gita lehava adamatis lemas machasi. But I don't want it to be a get until you actually get to mas machasi. So therefore, the Tanakama said, interesting way the Gemara is explaining it, but therefore she could eat truma until the shliach gets to Montana, because she was saying that, look, I want you to get my get in Montana. Sometimes he's in Jersey. So if she's saying that, why is she saying that? It's obviously because she doesn't care where he gets it from. She wasn't makbid about specifically over there to receive the get like in the previous Mishnah. But she was essentially saying, but I want you to get to Montana. That's when I'll be divorced. So okay, she could eat truma until he actually gets to the Masa Machasya. Now the Mishnah then said, Rebbe Lazar oisem miyad. Rebbe Lazar, however, says that she's going to be forbidden. So according. What did it say? He's not a shliach up until what? Then?
Maybe part of his shliach, just
right.
Complete it. Well, he's not a shliach until he's not a couple to get until he gets to.
I mean, it's not a get.
It's a tnai for the shlichus. Beginning it, and completing the shlichus under this condition. It's done.
Right. Yeah, you could hear that. Right. So Taisa says, right, the Amalei have a shlich leilocha ad the matas hasav v'chvazam have a shlich leilocha b'kiblei k'min perek sheni, or from Bavel to Masa Machasya, it's all shlich like Kabbalah. So that's really essentially what you're saying. It's like what he said, that it's like a Tanai in that. It's like a Tanai in the Kabbalah. So it sounds like she could make conditions in the shlichus, definitely according to Tanakama. Now Rebbe Lazar oisim miyad, he says no, she's forbidden right away. So the Gemara says pshita, obviously the Amar Mokum Hilai. Meaning, why is the Gemara saying pshita? That she was only telling him coordinates and not being makbid, because as Rashi explains, we already know Rebbe Lazar from the previous Mishnah. He said that a woman, since it's not dependent on her, so where she's setting the place is not considered a kapeda. It's just a Amar Mokum. So why do we need Rebbe Lazar to repeat himself in this Mishnah? So the Gemara says, Lo tzricha, no, it's necessary. This that we have to say that she's forbidden the truma right away is actually with the Amrle, she said to him, Zila Mizrach, go to the east, because the east of Mizrach is in the east. Vika Azul, and the Shliach actually went Lamayv to the west. Mauditim, what would you say that she's not become forbidden right away? Because B'mayav Holese, he's not in the west, to be concerned that maybe she bumped in, the Shliach bumped into him on the road when he left the city. You would think, okay, maybe it shouldn't be forbidden right away. That's what Rabbi Lazar is teaching in our Mishnah, that maybe when he was going, Megis Goyis Bay, maybe he bumped into him, the Yavle Gitin, they gave him the Gitin, even though she thought he was in the west and the east and not in the west, but maybe he did bump into him to the west, and therefore, since there's a possibility, and according to Rabbi Lazar, she's not giving a Kaviyas Malkim, just a Mara Malkim, and therefore she would be forbidden the Truma right away. Now, relating back to the halacha of the Mishnah, the Gemara brings the following halacha. If someone says to his agent, I want you to make an erev tchumen for me with dates, which many people in Lakewood area have erev tchumen with peanut butter all over, peanut butter in all these shuls, is because that's, as we spoke in Erevin, you have to have at least 2 meals worth of food that could be eaten with bread. So peanut butter is a very convenient thing. So as he says, I want you to make with dates with me. Right at the end of 2,000 amas, I want to walk to Simcha on Shabbos, put it 2,000 amas of dates. Meaning, what? Yeah, what are you going to do with that? Right, then you get into the discussion, it has to be right for him, it could be right for Acherim, right? So then, v'arvle begregris. He didn't use dates, he used dried figs. Or begregris, he says, make the air for me with dried figs. He made it with dates. So, what's the halacha? So, Tanicha de Eruv Erev, one brisa says, it's going to be a valid Erev. And another brisa says, in Eruv Erev, it's not going to be a valid Erev. So Amar Rabbi says, like Kash, it's not a difficulty. Why? Because it's a machlekes, meaning it's not a steer, it's a machlekes. Meaning, the one that says is not an Erev is Rabbanan. The one that says the Erev is Rebbe Lazar. What's this? So the Gemara explains. Rabbanan the Amri, this is the Rabbanan that they say, meaning in our Mishnah, we said regarding the woman, Harshlich le Kabbalah, we said that even though it's not dependent on her and we don't care about her, still the Rabbanan said that Kepeda, whatever a person says to her or to his shliach, that if they change it, you're not my shliach. Where we said, what do you mean? Why we said Rabbanan? Why would it be a Kepeda? It doesn't depend on you, the husband. It doesn't mean that you're not my shliach. So here also, if you didn't do as I told you, it's not an Erev, because I told you tomorrow and you use Gregors. So that's the Bryce that says it's not going to be an Erev. Rebbe Lazar. But the Bryce that says it is going to be an Erev is like Rebbe Lazar. By something that is two different Gersois in Rashi, either that's not a loss or something that it's not Kapeda, something that's not so particular, it doesn't bother the person. And therefore, use dates, you use dried figs, machmech, it doesn't make a difference to me what you did exactly. And we wouldn't say that would be hakpada because it's not relevant to you. And therefore, that's the same thing that the machlekes in our Mishnah would be the machlekes of these brises regarding the halachas of Erev Tchumen. That's one approach. Or another approach, says the Gemara, Rav Yisrael says, no, you could even say Havaha Rabbanan. Both brises are like the Rabbanan. And the truth is, they also didn't say the halacha of kapeda, of being bothered in particular when you change something, only by the case of our Mishnah by a woman. Why? Because there is where she's pleased that they should go in a certain place, and not in another place. She doesn't want people talking about her in a certain place. So therefore, we're going to say it's hakpada. But these brises, you could answer like this. The first brisa is bishaloi, meaning to say, when it's his, then we're saying it's going to be an Erev, because it doesn't bother him that you used my peanut butter or my almond butter, or if you used my dates or used my dried figs. It doesn't make a difference to me. So just like, although in our Mishnah that the Rabbanan were quoted as saying that the woman is particular and it's going to be, if you do not like that, it's not going to be a valid shliach l'kabbalah. That's specifically by shlichus of a get, because she doesn't want people talking about her. But elsewhere, we say that they're not makbid. So that's why this first brisa that says that it would be a valid Erev is like Rabbanan. What do you do with the other brisa that says it's not going to be an Erev? Is bishul chaveiroi. His friend gave him permission to use his dates for an Erev. And then he tells the shliach, hey, go take that guy's dates and make an Erev for me. And instead he made an Erev with the guy's dried figs. Oh, that's a kapeda, because he didn't have permission to use the guy's dried figs. And therefore that says the Gemara is what the second price of Erev is going to be talking about, because he didn't have permission to use someone else's dried figs. He only had permission to use his dates. On that, Abaye asked him, he says, really? Elo, the Tanya, what do you do with the following brisa that says, if someone says ancient, now the Gemara assumes right now what that means to say is, put the Erev of me in this closet that's there at the end of 2,000 amas. And instead he put it into the guy's dovecot, which is where the birds go, the birdhouse. Or he says, put it into the dovecot, and instead he put the Erev into the closet. The Tanya, learn one brisa, it is going to be about an Erev, but Tanya, learn another brisa, Erev is not going to be about the Erev. Says Abaya Hasa, the way you're answering, that it depends on if it's his own or if it's friends, and that's how you answer regarding the dates and the dried figs. What does that have to, what do you say that person would be mocked? But you think a person would care if he says, oh, you want to put your Erev on my property? No problem. put it into the dovekat, and he puts it in the closet. You think it's going to bother him? Regarding using a guy's fruits, you could understand it bother him. But the Gemara assumes to say that the guy wouldn't be mocked, but if he lets you put something, you put your basket of dates in his closet or in his dovekat. So how could you answer the machlekes over here, the contradiction, by saying that it depends on if it's b'shaloi b'shal chaver? Says Gemara no hasan nami there also. It's not talking about where you're putting the produce. It's ikab peire de migdal peire de shaybach. When we're talking about b'migdal, it wasn't regarding putting your dates in the closet. Rather, there was peiris that the guy had in the dovekat or in the migdal. And regarding those places, you only get permission to use those and not those. That's where they would depend on if it's b'shaloi b'shal chaver. The Bryce that says that it would be valid is by his own. B'shal chaver would be talking about when it was the one that's not an Erev, it would be b'shal chaver because he never had permission to use the peiris from the dovekat or from the closet. Yeah, look, the next Mishnah. Now moving back to the shlichus of the Baal, which is how we opened up the parakol Eimer. If someone says to his agent, now regarding back to the shlichus of the Baal regarding the get. So Eimer, someone says, Kisvu get v'tenu le'ishti. Write a get and give it to my wife. Now, the terminology of people has already been established that they call, and it really doesn't say in the Torah the word get. It says v'chasavla sefer krisus, right, for a book of severance. But the terminology of conventional use has already been the word of get. So, and the reason why Rashi pointed that out is because that's what this mission is discussing. What are terminologies of get, to know that he's specifying that he's saying to give her a get. So when he says write a get and give it to my wife, to us it seems obvious, but Rashi had to point that out, that get, really, the word get really means shtar. When he says write her a shtar, you wouldn't know what that means. Kisvu get means to write her a sefer krisus and give it to her. That's one case. Let's say he says girshua, divorce her. So Rashi points out here also that the custom has already become to say really the word gerushin really is nothing to do with gitin per se. It's a generic terminology of Pari chasing out the Jews. To be megarish means to chase away. So, but common parlance has already been that girshua would mean to give her a get, or kisvu geres v'tnula, write her a letter and give it to her. So Rashi points out that's also a terminology of get, that you write it, and therefore, because one of the terminologies, the geres shavukin, that's one of the terminologies of get. So all these cases would be that you would write for a get and you would give it to her. We know what you're talking about when you use these words. You're obviously specifying to write her a get. However, the following terminology does not simply imply divorce. Let's say you say patrua, which so that's not significant, because patrua could mean from the word of pater and chayva, which maybe, let's say, you just want to lighten from her the debts that she's liable for. So patrua, to release her, could mean let her off the hook from something. Or let's say you say parnasua. So all the terminologies of parnasa are terminologies of taking care of her needs. So if we don't know which needs, is it the needs of a get, where she shouldn't have to be addressing herself to the brother-in-law for yibum, or the needs of clothing and garments? So that's also not specific. And also asala kenimur. So let's say you say do her like the statute is. We don't know which statute, which chak, the statute of Gitin or the statute of food and of clothing. And so to asala karo. Let's say it says do to her as it's appropriate. Again, all these cases, Lamakum hasn't said anything because you didn't specify something that implies divorce specifically, and therefore that wouldn't be a shlichus of Gitin. Now, the other terminology, says the Gemara, Tanbalon Nabraisa, Shalchua. Let's say he says to the agents, send her away, which is a terminology of a shilcha mibeisa, as it says in Dvarim Chav Daled, is what this person is picking. Or let's say it says shavkua, abandon her. And that's also, like we said, regarding the terminology of Igeres, where it says in the get, V'dan dehaben lechim enoi sefer teruchim Igeres shvukin, it also says Igeres shvukin. So it's a letter of abandonment. Or let's say it says tarchua, which is a terminology of gerushin, of teruchin, which is also this idea of sefer teruchin that says over there. So hare elu yichtav, if he says any one of these terminologies, they will write and give her the get, because again, these words are mentioned in the get itself. So it's designating the terminology of a get. Now, however, let's say he says, like we said in the Mishnah, patrua, release her, panusua, provide for her, asla kanimas, do for her as the statute, asla kara, do for her appropriate. Loi maklum, he hasn't said anything. Now, the Gemara brings Tanya Linda Braisa. Reb Nosson Aimi makes the following interesting distinction, which the Tana of Mishnah did not make, and the Gemara is going to discuss why that is. Patrua, there has to be a patach here. That's why there's no yud. Patrua, releaser, dvarav kayamin. His words are valid. It is a terminology of get piturin, which is a terminology of releasing from the marriage, because patrua is obviously a terminology of a command, like we find shalchuha. So therefore, since there's a dogish, there's a stress, it's a shalchua, a patach. So that means get piturin. It's a get of release. But if let's say he says pitruha with a yud over there, even though it would be a word of a command, it would be a rafa, it would be a soft command, like shilchu mikem or shimu malachim, not shalchuha, but rather shilchu. So therefore, pitruha over here would be lemakom, would be, you didn't say anything. Why? Because that would mean the terminology of pater and chayva. Because if it was of peturin, of gerishin, he should have been madgish, he should have stressed and said patrua, release her. Pitrua means that no, release her from debts. Whereas patrua means release her from the marriage. Now, that's the statement of Reb Nosson. Now, the Gemara explains, Amar Rava, says, Reb Nosson de Bavlo, Reb Nosson, who is a Babylonian, meaning he came from Babel, the Gemara says, Bavvaso, I was brazen regarding in front of Nosson Habavli. He was a Babylonian. So why is that significant? Dayik being pitrua lepatrua. So he was making the diuk. He was analyzing and being analytical and differentiating between patrua and pitrua. What does that mean? So Rashi explains. Sometimes they would talk in Aramaic, and sometimes they talk in Hebrew. Like the people, the Mamalosh, the kind is on verstehen, or you were talking Ivrit. Right? You say something, they talk different languages in the house. So therefore, when a person is going to say that's a Babylonian patrua, he is saying Aramaic, and he's saying get piturin, which is Aramaic, because he's madgish that he wants to be megarish. But when he says pitrua, he's talking in Hebrew and Ivri, which is pater and chayva, which is a Hebrew word. So there's significance in the difference of the dialect that you're saying, specifically because you talk Aramaic and Hebrew. But Tana Didan, the Tana of our Mishnah, the Bar Eretz Yisrael, who is some of Eretz Yisrael, and he only talks Ivri, loy dayik. There's no difference between patrua and pitrua. In those situations, it's not intending for a get piturin, because piturin is only an Aramaic word, which would be the targum of shiluach, of sending away. So only if you talk Aramaic, you're from Bavel, would there be significance? And therefore, Reb Nosson was being medaik between patrua and pitrua. But if you're Israeli, you only talk in one language, and you might say patrua, pitrua, you might say mirpesed, marpesed, like I've gotten corrections. But either way, you mean one thing and only one thing and nothing else. So therefore, says the Gemara, that's the understanding of the machlokes between the Tanakama and Reb Nosson. Now, other terminology the Gemara asks is, what happens if you say, Iboilu hoitzi'uha mahu? What's halacha? You say, here, take her out. What's the question? So the Gemara, Rashi explains, do we say that the husband was picking the terminology of the pasuk? It says, v'yatsa mebeisai. So that, therefore, he's signifying that he wants to do a gerushin. Or maybe, no, it's not the terminology of the pasuk. Why not? Because the pasuk doesn't say, v'yitzia mebeisai. It says, v'yatsa, she leaves. Not take her out. So taking her out is not signifying the terminology of the pasuk. That's the question. Or what happens if azvua mahu? What happens if he says, leave her? What does that mean? What's the question? So on the one hand, it's really the terminology written in the get of Igeres Shavukin. Igeres Shavukin is a letter of forsaking. Or maybe that, no, since it's not any word of Haziva written in the get, its idea is written in the get, but that word itself is not written, so maybe it's not terminology of the get. Another case, Hitiruah Mahu. What happens if he says, relieve her? What's the question? So Rashi explains here also. On the one hand, it's the terminology written in the get of Harayat Muteres L'Chaladim. That's the primary text of the get. You're permitted to every single person. Or maybe it could mean Hataras Nadarim. It could mean untying the belt. Like it just says, Hitiruah, relieve her, untie, open up. We don't know what that means. It could mean anything. Or Hanichu Mahu. Let's say they write, let her be. Or Ha'ilulam Mahu. What's Allah? Let's say they say, help her out. Or Asla Kadas Mahu. Also they say, do to her as required. We don't know what the halacha is in all these cases. But says the Gemara, Pasha Miyachada, one of them we could prove the Tanya Leglin, the Brisa. Asla Kadas, if he says, do to her as required, or Asla Katnimas, do to her as is the statute, or Asla Kara, do to her as is appropriate. Lo Makom, you haven't said anything, so that case is clearly explained in the Brisa. We just start the next Mishnah. Mishnah continues regarding the shlichus of the Baal to write a get. Originally, they would say, if someone goes out in chains to be executed by the government, and he says, write a get for my wife. So even though he didn't say tenu, give it, which would normally be insignificant, write a get, what does that mean? You didn't say to give it, but they said that they should write it and give it, even though they didn't say give it. The reason for that is because of his dread that he's about to be executed, he gets confounded and doesn't specify, but of course he wants it to be given. They subsequently said more cases. Also someone that's going overseas on the boat, if someone's going in the caravan into the desert, that here also the person really gets overwhelmed that he's taking such a trip. So although he didn't say give, he means that. And he says and also someone that's very ill, in danger of his life, when he says write the get to my wife, he's not just playing games and just saying just to write it. He means to give it, and therefore we will not only write it, we'll also give the get. Thank you to any time.